Please, everybody, come forward, and there are plenty of seats here, anybody who's standing. First, I'd like to introduce His Excellency Ambassador Egidijus Meilūnas, the Ambassador of Lithuania to Canada, representing also today the International Demining Capability Coalition, and will be speaking and is working on Lithuania's key role in demining and insecurity in Europe. Ambassador? I'd like to also call to the stage Yulia Koba, Senior Program Officer of the Ukraine Bureau in Peace and Stabilization Operations Program at Global Affairs Canada. And Mr. Alexander Landry, Director of Federal Engagement and Partnership at OVA, Research Fellow, Institute of Peace and Diplomacy, former CAF engineer officer who worked at NATO Allied Land Command and NATO headquarters, and worked also with Operation Unifier, providing ETHAR training across Ukraine. Today we also have, let's wait for some applause for you. Today we're also very, very grateful to have two guest speakers from Ukraine. They are joining us today virtually from Kyiv. The first is Markian Kchik, UNOPS Operations Advisor in Mine Action in Ukraine, former combat engineer with the Canadian Armed Forces, and who has since 2022 been an EOD operator and trainer in Ukraine. And also Mr. Tymur Pistriuha, founder and CEO of the Ukrainian Deminers Association, which is the largest mine action organization in Ukraine. I'd like to invite Ambassador Meilūnas to speak about what is needed for a just and long-lasting peace. After that, we'll watch a video on demining, and then we'll start our discussion. Ambassador.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Lesya, for introducing me. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to this very important conference, to this very important panel on demining. It's no doubt that contamination of Ukraine by Russian landmines, unexploded ordnance is one of the most tragic consequences of this very brutal war. As you probably might know, starting from February 2024, more than one third of Ukraine's territory was contaminated by Russian landmines. That means around 100,000 square kilometers. Russian landmines are killing every day innocent civilians. Starting from February 2022, more than 1,100 innocent Ukrainian civilians were killed or severely injured, and many of them are children. And no doubt, this contamination creates a huge challenge for Ukraine's economy. Just to give you one figure, agriculture sector alone every year, because of contamination of lands, Ukrainians face $11 billion loss of their GDP only in sector of agriculture. So it's a tragic consequence of Russian brutal war and a complex issue, problem of national security, economy, and long-term resilience. To tackle this problem, international Demining Capability Coalition was established a year ago in February 2024, Lithuania, together with Iceland, has an honor to lead this coalition. Now we have 23 members. A few weeks ago, Taiwan joined with financial contribution this coalition, but I probably will go more into details a little bit later. I would like to take this opportunity and thank you for allowing me to share some views about, as Lesya mentioned, what we need for just and long-lasting peace. But first of all, having in mind that we are in Canada, member of NATO, our ally, our friend, country which, like Lithuania and other like-minded countries, supports very strongly Ukraine, I would like to share a few comments on a threat Russia is posing to transatlantic community. It's no doubt if Russia is not stopped in Ukraine, it will move forward. Would you like to know which directions they are going to move? I would recommend you to read a book published 20 years ago in Moscow, written by Alexander Dugin, Foundations of Geopolitics. I hate to recommend reading insane books written by Russian fascists, but if you would like to learn about true Russian intentions, you should read this book. So, 1997, 28 years ago, just few sentences from this 400 pages book. First sentence, Belarus should be a part of Russia. Second sentence, Ukraine is the main obstacle to Russia's future expansion. So, Ukraine should be divided into three parts. Eastern part should belong to Russia. Central part, including Kiev, should be governed by pro-Russian government, and about third part, please read yourselves. Third part, and here I would like to draw attention of our Canadian friends. The Arctic should be fully controlled by Russia because it plays a crucial role in their long-term geopolitical strategy. Fourth sentence, US, I quote, what Russians said, wrote 28 years ago. US is the main adversary of Russia. So, what is the solution? What Dugin is proposing? To destroy United States. And he writes, we have to destroy American empire and it will be destroyed. And last but not least, two sentences that sound totally insane. I quote, the new Russian empire should be Eurasian, highly continental, and in the future, worldwide. The battle for Russian world domination is not over. Sounds insane? Yes, but they are implementing this evil plan. So what we have to do to stop them and to prevent from implementing this evil plan? The best, what was proposed, it was the peace formula by President Zelensky. But I would like to just mention three key crucial elements. First of all, to restore full restoration of Ukraine's territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders from 1991. There should be no compromise. Second, holding Russia accountable and ensuring adequate, I would like to stress, punishment for its war crimes. Why Russia today is so brutal, cruel? Why they don't care about anything? Because they have never been punished for their terrible crimes against other nations, including my country, Lithuania. Because of Russia's occupation in 20th century, from 1940 to 1943, just in 13 years, we lost 25% of our population. Tens of thousands were brutally killed, hundreds of thousands were deported to Siberia and other remote areas, including Arctic, and hundreds of thousands were lucky they escaped, finding new home here in Canada, in the United States, in Australia, and other democratic countries. So if Russia this time is also not punished for its crimes, feeling of 100% impunity would encourage and escalate this situation. And last but not least, full-pledged membership of Ukraine in NATO. Only full-pledged membership in NATO will give Ukraine real security guarantees. But it will be also asset for us, for transatlantic community. Because you probably know that in last 3 NATO summits, Russia was named by NATO member states leaders as, I quote, from, for example, Washington or Vilnius NATO summit declaration, Russia is posing the most significant and direct threat to allies. So Ukraine, which proved capable, paying huge price, but they proved that they are capable effectively fight with this threat, it would be a great asset. Ukraine's membership in NATO would give more security to us. Ukrainians would give security guarantees to us. So here I would stop and looking for discussions at this demining session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I believe we have a video now that could be shown. And it was produced by our partner in Kyiv called Ukrainian Deminers Association.
Це не просто професія. Це поклик. Щоденна важка праця, яка вимагає витримки, зосередженості та абсолютної відданості. Сапери – це люди, що повертають надію на краще майбутнє та безпечне сьогодення. Кожен знешкоджений вибухонебезпечний предмет – це чиєсь врятоване життя. І поки ми живемо у відносному спокої, вони щодня ризикують, щоб цей спокій став можливим. Асоціація саперів України було створено 12 листопада 2018 року. Ми об'єднали найвідданіших і найвідважніших людей нашої країни, що ціною власної безпеки боронять життя та здоров'я цивільного населення, повертають мир та спокій на українські землі. Наша місія – зробити Україну безпечною разом. Ми прагнемо об'єднати та підвищити потенціал кращих фахівців з протимінної діяльності України, розробити єдині національні стандарти з протимінної діяльності та забезпечити їх контроль та впровадження, об'єднати зусилля держави, громадського суспільства, ЗМІ та міжнародних партнерів для створення належних умов праці та захисту наших саперів.
Hopefully this video gives you a bit of an idea of what demining on the ground looks like. And our first question today will go to Mr. Markian Kchik, who has been on the front lines and close to the front lines, involved in operational and other demining. Mr. Kchik, how is the situation in Ukraine different from other areas of the world being demined, particularly in relation to different types of demining happening in Ukraine? Specifically, could you explain to us the differences between humanitarian, operational, and tactical demining?
Thank you, Lesya. So first of all, if we compare Ukrainian case in comparison to, Cambodia, Afghanistan, Syria, these countries have faced significant landmine challenges, okay? But Ukraine's situation is unique to the 3 main factors. So number one factor would be intensity, scale, and duration of conflict, right? Because basically is we have a demining happening while the conflict is still ongoing. And the lines are moving. You know, there's a vast amount of area that have been deoccupied and civilian population moving back in, starting to work in those areas. The next one is the diversity and explosive threat. Okay, and basically is the use of advanced and diverse munition that requires specialized clearance techniques for each and single one of them. Okay, just to have a quick understanding is the identification guide that has been put together in Ukraine, it basically changes on a weekly basis due to this factor. Okay, and then the last one is the rapid expansion of demining capacity within Ukraine. So Ukraine answered to this call very quickly. At the current moment, there's over 80 humanitarian operators in the demining, in demining, and this doesn't even include the staff that involved in the operational demining as well. If we can quickly go over these factors, right? So for example, just when we talk about scale, at the current moment, and this does not include anything to do with the actual conflict. So in the front line and forward, this is just in the rear. There's been over 1 million, there's close to 1 million of UXO that has been disposed of in Ukraine. Okay. And we all talked about the vast amount of area, that is larger than some of the countries within Europe.
Thank you very much.
The rapidly evolving threat in the military, the threat is evolving, and not just evolving, but it's evolving at a military industrial scale. So it's scaled up right away, and to reflect on that, it requires just as rapid response in countermeasures. One of the examples would be the fiber optics drones, right? And how we have to. So if we compare this, the closest thing that it would compare to would be the end years of the World War II, and doesn't even come close to that, right? All of these factors require a special approach. And one of them is the type of demining operations that take place in Ukraine. So we have, first of all, we have a tactical demining, and that is conducted by military personnel within the active conflict zone. So it would be on the front lines and forward. Then we have operational demining, and that takes place geographically within the first 20 kilometers from the front line, as well sometimes further into the rear, okay? And carried out by SESU, which is Emergency Services, National Police EOD Department, and Special Transportation Services. Mainly reason for operational demining is basically sometimes it required a rapid response to clear infrastructure, roads, power lines, gas, water, buildings. After a vast amount of area has been deoccupied and people moving back in, they need a quick response to clear some of these, some of this infrastructure. As well, it includes spot calls. A grandma will call that something landed in her backyard and somebody needs to come out there. And then finally, the humanitarian demining, right, which focuses on clearing land for safe civilian use. So in this case, it would be, the vast amount of farmer fields and just villages that require safe environment for the people that are moving back in.
That's very useful, and thank you for explaining those three. We will have a slide a little bit later on. We just can't show slides and our speakers at the same time. But when that slide comes up, we will come back to those points that you made. Thank you, Markian, and thank you also, Tymur, Mr. Pistriuha in Kyiv. We know it's late there for both of you. Mr. Pistriuha, could you please explain to us the difference between mine action and demining? And then we also have another question for you because of your work on the ground. Could you please also help us understand what is meant when we hear about demining operators working in Ukraine? Who are we talking about, and what are their roles or obligations?
Yes, sure. Thank you for your questions. Good evening, audience. So the answer for first question is simple, because humanitarian demining is one of the pillar of humanitarian mine action. If you look on theory, so humanitarian mine action consists of 5 pillars, which are humanitarian demining, but it's also include explosive ordnance risk education, mine victim assistance, advocacy, which is like one of the instrument to ban or limit it to use landmines, and stockpile destruction. So I think it's clear that humanitarian demining is just part of mine action, which is broader definitions than just humanitarian demining. To answer for second question, mine action operator, it's different type of entity. I try to explain by simple words. Different type of entities. What it means that it can be like state entities, it can be even like military or CESO units, it can be commercial company, NGO, international or national like us. But the most important that this entity should pass certification process to be mine action operator. In other country, I know sometimes it's confused because this process usually called like accreditation, but in my country it's called certification. But it's like meaning still the same. So the most important that they should prove their capacity to execute tasks relating to process where they go to certification. So it means that each process of humanitarian mine action required to have separate certification. For example, I can be mine action operator for EORE, for explosive ordnance risk education, but to do like non-technical survey or manual clearance or explosive ordnance disposal, I still need to have separate certificate for this process. But all of them who have at least one certificate for one process of mine action, call it in my country mine action operator.
Thank you very much for that. And we will be touching upon also the idea that I think is related to this question of operators and certifications, and that is the structure in Ukraine and how Ukraine has a system that doesn't always necessarily exist in other countries where especially humanitarian demining is happening. I'd like to also ask our guest here, Alex, how the situation in Ukraine is different from what you may have observed when you provided training through Operation Unifier in Ukraine before 2018.
Yeah, thanks, Lesya, and thank you for having me as well. So deployed to Ukraine in 2018, working with the sapper teams and doing engineer small team training, both in Yavoriv and Kamenets-Podilsky. And in a word, it's exponential. That's the word that encompasses it. So from a Canadian perspective, coming out of Afghanistan in the 2011 timeframe, and just moving into seeing what was happening on the contact line between 2014 and 2018 when I went, we were just seeing a lot more prevalence of pervasive munitions, booby trapping, and just UXOs and whatnot that we hadn't seen to the scale, obviously, in Afghanistan. So for us, it was more at the time important to conduct sapper training, which was also parallel to the humanitarian demining, obviously because the outright invasion hadn't happened yet, which came later in 2022. So for us at the time, it was looking at explosive threat hazard awareness recognition, building packages essentially that could be delivered in a decentralized method across the country by the forces on Operation Unifier and Operation Interflex. And then since then, just since 2018 and being in touch with people that would take up the mantle and deploy after me, as well as watching it when I was with NATO land forces in 2022 up until 24 when I came home in July, it's incredibly different now as a context because we've really moved away from just UXOs and what we call in the business dummy mines. We're looking now at things like top attack, integration obviously of drones, which are unquestionably a revolution in military affairs that we've seen in these past 10 years. And of course, the integration now of artificial intelligence. So the ability for there to be sensors within the mines that are detecting different methods of approach, attack, and that are more discriminate, but also less discriminate at the same time. And I'm sure we'll chat about that when we get to the Ottawa Treaty a little bit later. So yeah, the word to take away, definitely exponential and rapidly growing out of scope than what we're able to keep up with on the operator side, especially when we consider we're doing this at the same time as, fighting an outright conflict. So that's the key there.
And we know that people often ask about safety, deminer safety, and how are people being affected? Those doing this work, are they surviving? Are they being killed or maimed? And we will come back to that in a second. But first, we'll look at international support and donor coordination, which is a very important topic to understand, how best to support Ukraine and what is being done. And Ambassador Meilūnas, I wanted to ask you, what is the role of the International Demining Capability Coalition, co-led by Lithuania and Iceland? How is the challenge of demining Ukraine being addressed by the international community of governments at government ministries of defense and NATO to support Ukraine in this area?
Thank you very much, Lesya. Let me start by saying when Russians brutally attacked Ukraine, I believe they didn't calculate two things: bravery and heroism of Ukrainians and their determination to fight against this 21st century evil, but they also didn't expect that international democratic community would express such great solidarity and assistance to Ukraine. Probably Putin, as usually, was thinking that those in the West are cowards and weak, and they just will accept so-called, as Russians say, new reality. But we didn't accept it, and actually this international demining coalition is only one of many examples of strong solidarity with Ukraine. So, as I mentioned, the International Demining Coalition for Ukraine was established more than 1 year ago in February 2024. Now we have 23 countries. Majority of these countries are members of European Union and NATO, but we also have Moldova, Japan, and recently Taiwan joined with very practical contribution. Primary objectives of these coalitions are three. We are focusing on equipping, training, and sustaining of specialized units capable to conduct both military and humanitarian, as it was already mentioned by Ukrainian colleague, mine clearance operations. I also would like to draw attention to key roles and activities of this coalition. First of all, it's procurement and delivery of equipment. Let me give some examples what we did in 1 year. Actually, member states of this coalition donated, since February 2024, donated equipment from national stocks to Ukraine, Ministry of Defense and Armed Forces of Ukraine demining units worth approximately 473 million euros. Last August, we also established the coalition fund because we need long-term programming, and in this regard, I would like to mention that a roadmap which extends until 2034 was approved by coalition members, and it anticipates over 700 million euros in equipment expenses alone. Then, speaking about equipment, just to mention a few practical examples, we supplied SUVs, armed vehicles, mine detectors, demining kits, unmanned demining vehicles, blasting machines, anti-drone rifles, and other stuff needed for demining. Now, training and capacity building. Just to mention one figure, coalition has facilitated the training of over 400 Ukrainian demining specialists in accordance with NATO and mine action standards. I already mentioned about long-term strategic planning and last but not least, fund management and coordination. In this regard, I am happy to inform you that Lithuanian Central Project Management Agency administers coalition fund overseeing procurement, ensuring efficient, transparent and accountable allocation of resources. I would like to mention there are, of course, it's very complex tasks. There are some challenges. I would like to mention just one challenge. While majority of international donors focus on humanitarian demining, the combat demining sector remains still fragmented and underfunded. So here we need probably to double our efforts. And last but not least, about one country's, namely Lithuanian national contribution. So generally speaking, Lithuania is a very small country, just 3 million population, but we say that Ukrainians are our brothers and sisters, and they are fighting also for our free future. So we try to support us as much as possible and even more so. Our total support to Ukraine is more than 1.5% of GDP. That includes humanitarian, financial, other support, but half of it is military support. Until 1st of January of this year, value of the support was 815 million euros. This year, we are going to reach more than 1 billion. And in this regard, speaking exactly about the mining, we need for this year's coalition 150 million. We collected already more than 70 million, and more than one third of this came from Lithuania. Thank you.
Lithuania is indeed a great supporter of Ukraine, a relatively close neighbor, and like you say, a brother. And I think this idea of brothers, Russia had that idea of a forced brotherhood, and the rest of the world, of the civilized world, has true brother and sisterhood, and people supporting each other and doing the right thing. So we are, I think everybody here in the room is, and far beyond, is very, very grateful to Lithuania and our other supporters as well. And I'm pleased to say that, or just to note that of the 400 sappers, the Ukrainians who were trained or counted into the coalition for training, 130 of these were trained under a program with Mriya Aid last year, and Mriya Aid's part of the coalition as well. So we're very proud of that, and that was in 2024. This year, we trained a few dozen others. And so I'd like to then turn our attention to the Government of Canada and how some of this training is happening. Ms. Koba, would you please speak to us about donor coordination and Canada's participation in the coordination structures supporting Ukraine? And specifically, what support has Canada provided to Ukraine in mine action over the years and more recently?
Thank you, Lesya. And first of all, thank you for having me here and giving me this opportunity to join this important discussion. I would like to start by saying that Canada is one of the leading bilateral donors to mine action in Ukraine. Government of Canada recognizes the critical importance for Ukraine to clear its land effectively and quickly, to enable recovery, to unlock reconstruction, and to ensure, first and foremost, safety and security for the communities that suffer the most throughout this war. Since February 2022, Government of Canada contributed 88 million to support mine action in Ukraine, and the bulk of this support has been focusing on strengthening Ukraine's own mine action capacity. We also actively engage in various donor coordination structures because we need to ensure that the government support is targeted, that it's in line with Ukraine's national human action strategy and is well coordinated with the support of other partners. So one of the key platforms for donor coordination in Ukraine is the sectoral working group on humanitarian demining, which is led by the Ministry of Economy. Another key element of donor coordination are annual high-level conferences, and Canada regularly participates in those. There are annual partner workshops. Canada has also been invited and joined the advisory board of the Center for Humanitarian Demining, which is Ukrainians' newly created, so to say, institution that is in charge of operational tasks and coordination on a national level. And we are also co-chairing the Gender in Mine Action initiative group under the sectoral working group for humanitarian demining. And next slide, please. Government of Canada has been supporting mine action in Ukraine through a whole series of its international assistance instruments. Through Global Affairs Canada, the focus has been on humanitarian demining. Through security programs, including the program that I represent, Peace and Stabilization Operations Program, we have been supporting training and equipping for state deminers, as well as the efforts of non-governmental organizations that work in communities providing explosive ordnance risk education, survey, and clearance. Through the bilateral development program, the focus of support has been on supporting small-scale farmers, as well as strengthening capacity of Ukrainian state demining agencies. So now on the screen, you see a bit of evolution of Canada's support of mine action in Ukraine. But before I walk you through that, I wanted to mention that there is also the D&D, the Department of National Defense, focus on supporting combat and operational demining. And in that regard, it's training and equipping the Ministry of Defense and the Armed Forces of Ukraine, SAPAS, to undertake their tasks in line with international mine action standards to ensure that they operate safely and efficiently. So since the war erupted in the east of the country, Canada's support has been focusing on helping Ukraine adopt its mine action law, which was adopted at the end of 2022. Then strengthening capacity of newly created mine action institutions, the state ones, as well as supporting the efforts of international organizations like Fondation Suisse de Déminage to do mine action practically in Luhansk and Donetsk regions. As well as what Alex mentioned before, the training for combat engineers and explosive ordnance disposal for military sappers. When the full-scale invasion hit and the needs increased exponentially, Canada provided very rapid and targeted support, and examples are, for example, enabling Hela Trust to quickly scale up their response to the newly liberated areas of Kyiv, and to make sure that it's safe to return to Irpin, to Bucha, to Makariv. Another example was donation of demining equipment to the National Guard of Ukraine, or purchasing Canada-produced bomb suits for the State Emergency Service of Ukraine. Also in 2022, the Government of Canada announced 30 million of new support to help Ukraine demine its territory. And this funding allowed us to program a whole series of initiatives that supported, first of all, strengthening Ukraine's own capacity in 2023. That included direct procurement of 22.5 million worth equipment to the State Emergency Service of Ukraine, together with the maintenance and training package to ensure that this equipment is being used effectively. It also included support to the Tetra Tech initiative, which is focusing on training state deminers in line with international mine action standards. Also in 2023, the Mriya Aid project was launched. That is training the military sappers, again, in line with international mine action standards. In 2024, at the beginning of 2024, the strategic partnership between Canada and Ukraine, the bilateral security cooperation agreement, has been signed. And again, the government announced 35 million of new funding to support mine action, as it is one of the key areas of the cusp of the Canada-Ukraine Strategic Partnership Agreement. And just very recently, my program, Peace and Stabilization Operations Program, launched a number of initiatives through UN entities, through international and national non-governmental organizations to support a variety of aspects of mine action in Ukraine. Next slide, please. So now on the screen, you see the commitments that are outlined in Canada-Ukraine Strategic Security Partnership Agreement. There are 6, and they touch upon the areas that I already mentioned before. I'll quickly run through them. First and foremost, strengthening humanitarian demining capacity of state institutions, supporting mine action efforts of non-governmental organizations that work in the communities, extending and expanding explosive ordnance risk education to ensure that Ukrainians are aware of the risks that are posing the mines and other explosive remnants of war in their communities and are prepared to respond to those risks. Also addressing the needs of small-scale farmers and rural households affected by landmines and explosive remnants of war, and help these small farmers to return their land plots into productive use. Promoting an inclusive approach to mine action is a cross-cutting priority, which ensures that all the efforts that are being supported by Canada integrate gender equality considerations and make sure take different perspectives from a variety of people living in the communities that are affected. And last but not least is developing combat demining capabilities of the defense forces of Ukraine. So these priorities are also the strategic roadmap for Canada to continue supporting mine action in Ukraine. The agreement has been signed. It covers the next 10 years to come. So this is a strategic approach that has started in 2024. And the last slide, I will not go in the details of the examples of the projects that are being supported by the Government of Canada, but you can see the 9 partners that are representing 9 operational projects that are currently ongoing with the Government of Canada support in Ukraine. And Tymur, I will allow myself a couple of seconds to tell you, you can't see me, but I'm wearing UDA colors today. I'm in black and yellow, and once Tymur told me that they selected these colors because sappers work relentlessly as the honeybees in Ukraine every single day. So that's in solidarity with UDA, with whom we are very proud to be partners.
Thank you so much. And so we've gotten a sense of international and here our Canadian contributions as well. And I wanted to ask Tymur, Mr. Pistriuha, who has been working for many, many years in with the Ukrainian ministries and partners right on the ground in Ukraine. Tymur, how is that work being prioritized in Ukraine and organized on a national level? If you could give us a sense of what Ukraine has in terms of a system or structure, particularly given that in other parts of the world, when organizations like the Halo Trust and other international NGOs come into, there's oftentimes no system or structure at all, governmental or otherwise, local or national. So if you could give us a sense of what sort of makes Ukraine special, I guess, in that regard.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for your question. But first of all, I want to jump in on what Yulia said and before Mr. Ambassador that, and I want to confirm and thank you. I say thank yous from all like Ukrainian Deminers Association for support for both countries. I mean Canada and Lithuania. Lithuania as a lead of coalition, but Canada who really launched and supported project which is really people-oriented project. I highlighted this because this is really important for us. But to your questions, I should started probably from that Ukraine has very good mine action system. And I am saying this not because I am Ukrainian, just because I'm really studying and learn a lot about international experience. I've had different opportunity to be in different international workshop, even like my action manager courses, where we exchange between like different stakeholders from different countries about their knowledge. And we should understand that Ukraine has very good established mine action system. We have mine action law. Not all country with mine action problem has mine action law. We have national mine action standard. We have already a national mine action strategy, which was adopted in 2024. We have we have mine action center and more than three now certification body, and it's unique actually because in around the world only one bodies, but as options we have different of them. So yes, our system quite complicated. Sometimes it's very difficult to understand, but it's really good established system. When we are talking about prioritizing how it's work in our country, so we have National Mine Action Authority, Secretariat, and National Mine Action Center, and we have plan, and we have every year we adopted a National Mine Action Plan for humanitarian demining, and we as an operator have area of responsibility. So it's like for us, it's also initial point. But obviously, we are communicate also with Romada level and Oblast level, and the situation change continuously, and sometimes something what was prioritized 1 month ago, maybe it's not relevant anymore. And we also should understand what Markian said, that we are working during full-scale war, and obviously situation is changed. But everything we coordinate through Mine Action Center. So if we need to start to do something, we send to Mine Action Center so-called request. Only when we receive permission from Mine Action Center, we as operator can start to do our work. This is important part, and this help our state prioritize and also control, like general picture and where mine action operator works, because we should also understand that currently in Ukraine we have more than 100 certified mine action operator, and obviously it's very difficult to like coordinate all of them, but this help to do this. I think I give you answer for your question, but if not, you can ask me additional.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Tymur. I'm just looking at my questions here, the ones remaining, and there are so many that I feel like, we could have another entire conference. So what I'll do is I will go to Markian Kchik with another question about donors, the donor question, and then we will. I'm just trying to plan also for us to have some questions at the end, so that we can get a sense of what kind of questions Canadians and the community here in Toronto has for you. So let me ask you, Markian, as someone on the ground, what have you observed, or what are you hearing from state agencies, operators in the field, others, with regards to any areas where donors or international coordination might be improved?
So first of all, I want to thank all the donors, because there's many stellar examples how the support to Ukraine has helped in here on the ground. But yes, there's always ways to improve, and it's not necessarily just from the donor side. It's also from the receiving agency side as well. I've had the privilege and I guess the luck to work on both sides, supporting some of the agencies in receiving the donations, and as well as working with the UNOPS, where I'm implementing the donations to Ukrainian agencies. So one very important aspect is communication. Okay, communication and understanding exactly what party, what agency in Ukraine, what are their tasks and what they're responsible. Something that Yulia brought up before is that, DND supports operational demining in Ukraine. So, for example, in Ukraine, majority of operational demining is actually handled, but not by DND. It's actually handled by Ministry of Interior. So it would be emergency services and police, right? So because of that, it is very important. Sometimes we get stuck in, analyzing and, for example, the situation is how we handle, back home, but it's not always the case, right? So that would be number one thing is, and also is maybe coming up, we have to have some sort of a utilization plan. We have to ask the agencies, Ukrainian agencies, to provide us with utilization plan so we have a better understanding exactly what is needed, and maybe even come up with some sort of mechanism for feedback, because as the threat changes and it changes on weekly, monthly basis, is sometimes something that worked a couple months ago doesn't necessarily cover your issues today. And lastly, and this is something else I want to say is very important as well, is we want to encourage donors to provide a complete packages. Not just, let's just say, a demining machine, but we need, the spare parts for it, logistical support, consumables for these machines, right? Which is very important as well, is because they're not always going to have the budget to be able to cover the stuff, but this is the bloodline of these demining operations. Is, if the machine doesn't have a way to move from point A to point B, or it doesn't have a spare parts to be working, and it's going to be, it's going to be very tough, right? So in my mind, these are the main kind of ways that we can improve. But number one is communication, communication, communication.
I just want to hop on that spot, actually, because I think the two gentlemen we have in virtually right now are being a little too humble. So Tymur and Markian, when they say that Ukraine is one of the best, if not the best right now, I have to underline that in the sense, in terms of mine action, they're second to none. And it's purely based on the fact that they're living the conflict, and they have to. But they take it very seriously, and they have since 2014 and realistically before, in the sense that when Canada showed up and said on Unifier and on Interflex with the British that they had to establish their own sapper programs, demining programs, they did it. And they've saved lives, and they've been operationally effective as a result of that. And when things got worse in 2022, and it's become exponentially more complex, they've adapted, and they've done it under the pressure. They're still doing both the humanitarian demining and the conflict zone itself, and they're establishing donors. Yet on our side here, I mean, up until last year, and we still haven't procured air defense. When Canada talks about procurement, air defense up until like a couple years ago for us was still general purpose machine guns. So I think it's commendable for us to look at Ukraine as an example, and the previous two panels have talked about this in terms of what we need to do to continue supporting. This is the reality of what it is take the example of doing it under pressure and apply it pan-NATO and actually put up and do the work and continue following the examples coming from the front and from Ukraine.
And even if we're, looking and considering humanitarian demining, it still is about operational demining mainly when the war is ongoing. And these people are the sappers, the deminers. They're the ones that are keeping everything moving, right? Without them, and so this is, I guess, akin to some of the agile technologies and whatnot in terms of support. Donor support. At least that's what I think I've been hearing as well. I also have a question for, it's to return to the question of safety, which you touched upon in your comments. Markian, Alexander, others, you're working in the operational demining domain, or have, where safety is considered but has to be balanced with rapid response, prioritization of clearance tasks, and so on. And, maybe some of you have heard the sapper motto in Ukraine, and I don't know about elsewhere, but "Ні кроку без нас," not a step without us. So, just to reiterate the absolute crucial work and work that, you can't do without this work at all anywhere in Ukraine. What hazards and dangers are explosive ordnance disposal professionals and deminers in Ukraine contending with, and what are the two top ways that deminer safety can be improved? Maybe Markian, if you can go first.
Yeah, so for example, one of the latest threat is going to be fiber cable guided drones, right? And in the beginning, they could be maybe just coming up close to the 20-kilometer zone. At this point, they're actually expanding, and they're going to be going past the 20-kilometer zone. So again, all the teams who are working within the 20 and now potentially even outside of it are going to be a threat. While they're working, they're going to be targeted. For example, I know for a fact that every single team that goes, police team, EOD police team that goes out into the 20-kilometer zone, even on just regular, call tasks, they are threatened. They're hunted by FPVs, and the same thing happens to majority of the teams who are working in that zone. Secondary impacts, right? Sometimes when the emergency responders come out to the site that has been impacted, and there's going to be a secondary impact in the same location, and it's purely just to hunt down the sappers, hunt down the emergency responders. So because of that, there's obviously is, and this is something to touch base on what Alex has just said prior to me, is about how quickly, Ukraine responds to changes. As soon as there's new threat, you have to quickly come up with a solution, because that will include, for example, all the teams that are going to be working closer to the front line. Electronic countermeasures. Every team pretty much has a drone radar, right? It's a must. It's a survival must to have this kind of stuff with you while working closer to the front line. I just hope that we would be just as quick and back in Canada, back home, to respond to this kind of, level of change, like a rapid change in the threat.
And when we're talking about adaptation, rapid change, and sort of going with what's needed on the spot, it maybe is a good segue for the question of the Ottawa Treaty. And so many of you know that 5 nations on NATO's eastern flank, Poland, Finland, and Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, have either signaled or formalized their intent to withdraw from the 1997 Ottawa Treaty banning anti-personnel landmines. Ambassador, I wanted to ask you, how has the unprecedented level and scope of Russia's aggression against Ukraine prompted Lithuania and other nations to reassess these commitments under the Ottawa Treaty?
Thank you, Lesya. We made this decision. It was very difficult. Lithuania is and will be loyal and reliable member of international democratic community. We are members of absolutely all international conventions, Geneva, other conventions, bilateral treaties, and it's no doubt that we are going to respect. But we made this decision, difficult decision, to leave Ottawa Treaty. Why? As I already mentioned in my introductory remarks, we have our own experience dealing with Russia, historic experience, dramatic, tragic, bloody experience. Just if you are interested, and I encourage you to be interested in Lithuania's history, because it, to big part, reflects whole Europe's history, last 230 years, this episode of our history, 170 years we were occupied by Russians, 3 times. And last occupation in 20th century, which lasted 50 years, we paid a huge cost, 25% of our population. Russians had very clear goal to exterminate us as nation. They were killing us, deporting us, torturing us, changing our identity. Today, in 21st century, we are witnessing the same brutality and cruelty in Ukraine. And I would like to share briefly my discussion with chief of Lithuanian paramilitary organization, Lithuanian Rifleman Union. It's voluntary paramilitary organization. Right now they have around 20,000 members who are determined and ready to fight if there is such a need, together with soldiers of regular army. So Colonel told me that before Russia's brutal aggression, genocidal war against Ukraine, for training purposes, they used German-French textbook on how to, fight with enemy, let's say in this way. But when, I quote what Colonel told me, when we saw what Russians did in Bucha, Irpin, and other villages, towns, and cities of Ukraine, we immediately withdraw this book. Why? Textbook. Why? Because it was textbook about so-called civilized war. I don't know if war could be in general civilized, but anyway, it was a war based on, at least on some rules, on Geneva Conventions. Russians don't care about any rules, about any Geneva or other conventions. They just are killing, torturing, kidnapping, shelling, destroying. So, having such experience, seeing what Russians are doing in Ukraine, we made this decision. It's part of our deterrence because Russians don't care about, as I said, norms, international law, but they understand one language. Very well understand, language of power and strength. I would like to quote you one Russian proverb. I would quote English translation from Russian. It sounds like that. The only thing that stops a crowbar is another crowbar. So I would like to assure you today that we will use all crowbars against Russians if they would dare to attack us. All possible crowbars, all possible arms, guns, and that's it. And other 4 countries you mentioned, they're also going the same way.
And it seems to me that this will also make Ukraine's job a little bit easier because I have heard that Ukraine has been criticized for some of the activities going on close to the front, at the front, and whatnot. And so I will ask you, Mr. Landry, Alex, if you could talk a little bit. In mid-April, you wrote an opinion piece in the Hill Times that and I cite, the Ottawa Treaty was one of Canada's proudest diplomatic achievements. And then you wrote about yourself saying, this author firmly agrees that Canada must not walk away from it. And you provided your thoughts on Canada finding a middle ground. And I'm curious about that. And would you please explain that position and your thoughts on this?
Yeah, for sure. I'd been thinking about this thought for quite a while prior to publishing the Hill Times op-ed that you're referring to. And the reality is I was really debating just talking about walking away and why the Ottawa Treaty had lost its relevance. Evidently, there's political sensitivity in Canada to the fact that it's called the Ottawa Treaty. And on top of that, it didn't help that in the April timeframe as written, it was the 27th or 8th anniversary of International Mine Action Day, and an op-ed the week before had been published by several senators, Mr. Lloyd Axworthy and Senator Dallaire, reaffirming our commitment to the Ottawa Treaty. So I thought maybe I should nuance my thoughts a little bit at the time with my op-ed coming up, as an unelected member and just somebody with an opinion. That being said, though, the ambassador is bang on with the thought. In an international rules-based order predicated on international relation theory of liberalism, when one person withdraws and decides to not play by the rules anymore, everyone turns back to realists. It's the reality we have to face. And General Cavoli spoke to it in 23 when he delivered his initial Sacker speech at the Swedish Security Forum, speaking to the fact that it's the return of hard power. This is where we're back at, and we have to come to terms with that. And if we're not, we're going to be left behind. So for me, as an engineer background, thinking about the Ottawa Treaty and its need for modernization, I mean, the treaty is more than 2 decades old now. We have to consider the need for caveats and modernization of it, because it's just unfair for us as a nation that has the geographical distance from such conflicts right now to ask those that are in immediate proximity on the eastern flank to work with an arm tied behind their back. It's just not realistic at this point to do so.
Thank you. That's a middle ground that I think we'd like to hear. That's like you say, in Canada it's a touchy issue, and at that time it's touchy. And I think that it's clear, what ought to be done, and that people need to accept that. And Ambassador, I believe you have another point or two on this question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just one point I would like to stress again. As I said, even in NATO summit declarations, it's enshrined, black on white, that Russia poses the most significant and direct threat to us, to allies, to 32 countries, to transatlantic community. But I hope maybe this year in the Hague summit, this word will be added. But anyway, it poses also, and it's very important to understand, an existential threat. Our history, Ukrainian history, shows that Russia poses to all of us existential threat. They say there is no such nations like Ukrainian. Recently, they published a book of so-called History of Lithuania with introduction by this war criminal whom they are calling Foreign Minister Lavrov. They say that there is no such nation like Lithuanian. If you would read this Dugin's book about fascist ideology, Ruski Mir, you would learn that Finns, Poles, other nations from Central and Eastern Europe, they also either not exist or have no right to exist. So if you are facing existential threat, you have to protect yourself to fight this existential threat by any instrument, gun, mean, which is available, which is possible.
I'm glad you mentioned NATO, actually, because I think we've talked about Article 5 a fair amount here in previous panels, but Article 3 of the Washington Treaty underlines the importance of countries being able to assure their own self-defense and fight off as that bastion, right? So and coming to close the loop on the Ottawa Treaty discussion, it's difficult to kind of have on the one hand saying we have to assure self-defense, and on the other hand say, but here's a bunch of tools you're not allowed to use, yet your adversaries definitely will use them. So the middle ground, staying within the NATO context, I think, is having caveats or crisis-type response operation, conventions that allow for use of tools that meet the situation and the conflict at hand. This isn't to say we have to walk away from the Ottawa Treaty, as you mentioned. It's really a question of modernizing it, sitting down and making it applicable and tailored to what we're facing right now in the current international context. And then when we get back to a peacetime stability, God willing, we can revisit what it looks like under peacetime operations, similar to how NATO has the peacetime operations and the crisis operations we're seeing right now in terms of its standardization.
This week, we were, some of us at CANCIC, the largest Canadian security and defense show. And a young man came up to me and explained to me that he's in charge of developing engineering and developing here in Canada mines that self-destruct after a certain amount of time and that really take additional precaution to avoid hurting civilians and ultimately also military personnel. And so technology, of course, in demining is such an important question, and we will come back to it in a second. But first, I wanted to look ahead a little bit and just mention that when we were in Ukraine, a lot of work is being done now to include veterans, for example, and women in demining. And sometimes we hear that demining is a man's job, and certainly in the past we have heard that. And this is particularly prevalent to operational, the military demining, where women in Ukraine represent, even though Ukrainian women are there doing this work, it's likely less than 1% compared to humanitarian demining, where women in Ukraine make up approximately 30%. I'm wondering, Yulia, what is your view on how women, peace, and security agenda and Ukraine's commitments to it can impact the role that women play in this field, both in Ukraine and more broadly?
Thank you, Lesya. More broadly, the linkages between women, peace, and security agenda and mine action are very strong. The two promote peace and security. Ukraine has been championing not only mine action, but women, peace, and security agenda as well. Ukraine was the first country to adopt a national action plan on women, peace, and security while being in the active conflict. There's a lot of great work being done at the moment to connect mine action national strategy and Ukraine's national action plan on women, peace, and security. And I'm proud to confirm that Canada is playing a very active role as we support both important agendas in Ukraine. Globally, mine action is a male-dominated sector. That's not only a case for Ukraine, but at the same time, employment of women in different roles in mine action helps first promote their economic empowerment. And in Ukraine, this is very important given the increased number of female-headed households. Women deminers also play important role model. They are role models that are breaking stereotypes and removing barriers that underestimate capacity of women and women's contributions to the war effort. And the war effort is not only about fighting, it's about the whole society effort, and a lot of it is now on women's shoulders. Explosive ordnance risk education, victim assistance, when it's gender responsive, when it's take considerations, differentiated needs of women, men, boys, girls, it's more effective. A lot of our partners have excellent practices that they put in place to support women's participation in mine action. They invest in training of female deminers. They build their leadership skills to ensure progression of women within their organizations. They provide childcare stipends for working mothers to ensure that the childcare angle is taken into account, because as you know, when women deminers are being deployed in the field for a lengthy period of time, they often, especially in the current reality, don't have anyone to watch after the kids. A lot of organizations are considering and have started already to buy personal protective equipment, PPE, that is manufactured to account for anatomical differences of the bodies of women and men. And what is the most important thing, that a lot of this equipment, a lot of these amazing initiatives are driven locally, produced locally, and overall, I know you will be talking about innovation very soon, but I want to highlight the point that it's all being driven locally, and international community is only supporting and enabling.
Thank you. And you know, when we give the training, as we have in the past year and a quarter, we've trained 176 sappers. And 19 of these were women, but 30% were trained to the highest level. And what we did is we had a post-training survey. And we wanted to know how these men and women, mostly men, some women, how they felt about the gender component of the training they had. We wanted to know, you know, were they okay with it? Was it interesting? What would they add to it? And what really surprised me was the number of men, the great majority responded that, you know, I thought this would be just sort of a bit of feminism foisted on me, but no, I really liked these discussions. I really enjoyed them. As a man, I felt like I could understand my female colleagues better, and they could understand me better. And so this really is about men and women, not just women, an agenda just for women. So we were very pleasantly surprised at the response. And so just to conclude, I'd like to say that Mine Action has been described as an economic enabler and a military force multiplier. We touched upon some of these elements, but this is something that in Ukraine, and in Europe, in conferences, people bring up a lot. These ideas, about essentially how important and central demining is to the recovery and reconstruction process, let alone the realities of the war. And we did discuss that there's many, or mentioned that we still have to come back to the question of technology and technological advances, AI, drones, and all of these questions. And I think that maybe the best way to do it is to take questions from the floor, but please feel free to ask questions about anything else as well that we've discussed today, and please direct your questions both to the speakers and panelists here in person, and also to Markian and Tymur in Kyiv. If we'd like to begin.
Hi. Do we have any idea how many mines we're talking about that are currently on the ground, and at what rate they come in on a monthly or annual basis?
I think Tymur has his hand up.
Yes. Tymur, go ahead.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have such statistic, and explained by logic, because we still on the full-scale war, and we should understand that when we are talking about contaminated area, it's not only about mines who are put by enemies, but it's also unexploded ordnance, which is as a result of shelling of the enemies. And because of scale of these activities from enemy side, we are just talking about some potential territory which can be considered as a potential contaminated territory. So we are talking about like 139,000 square kilometers as a potential contaminated territory, which include temporary occupied territory. We also should understand this. There are no statistic related to how many mines or unexploded ordnance in our land, but it is the biggest, and we are the most unfortunately contaminated country around the world. This is a fact.
Just if I may, to following this question, I found on internet that Russian stockpiles of landmines is around 22 million or something like that mines. Would it be possible, such a huge number?
It's important to consider too, when you think back to other extensive use of landmines and explosives. When you look at Belgium and France, there's still the red zones where they're doing demining operations literally 100 years later. To give context and also a plug for the exhibits in the back, if you take a look at the virtual reality story of war in the back, and then go to the MedEng booth staffed with as well some actual shrapnel that came directly from Ukraine. Shout out to Mark Payne, who's manning it, a friend of mine in the back. You'll see the size, but also kind of like the jaggedness of the projectiles or pieces that could cause damage, obviously, as part of be it mines, unexploded ordnance, or improvised explosive devices. So when you consider the rubble from the virtual reality, or just the state of play in terms of garbage and critical infrastructure that's been damaged, and how within that you can there'll be explosives that are unexploded or booby traps or whatnot that are not easy to spot. It's really impossible at this point to consider how much is contaminated outside of estimates. It's really just a question now of thinking any time there's been some sort of attack or infrastructure damage, there's risk right now in terms of the improvised explosive devices, the booby traps, or unexploded ordnance, which causes threats not just to the military operators, obviously, but to civilians and disproportionately children and women.
Markian?
And just to add on to what Mr. Ambassador and Alex were talking about, right? When we look at the stockpiles, that's the one thing is, but in addition to that, it is made, all that stuff is being produced on industrial scale right now in Russia. You will come across mines that have been produced in 24 and 23 and 25. So that's the one thing is, in addition to that, right, there's a vast amount of UXO that, the artillery, the mortars that come in, it could be that up to 25% of them doesn't explode, and that lays in the ground, and that basically presents a danger to civilians and military personnel. So just to give you a sort of on a weekly basis, and this is a plus minus, like currently shows that on a weekly basis, it's about 5,000 UXO and mines that are being destroyed, and that's only in the rear, in the safe area.
I want to underline that regardless if the conflict ended tomorrow, this will be a problem we will face for decades to come, and it will be a whole of society approach. It's not a question of being able to just rebuild the country. Like, this is something that's going to be pervasive in Ukraine for years to come, and is going to require much more than just defense and security to look at moving forward. It's going to have to be an international community approach at large.
And if you look at the number of drones, in various stockpiles and various, social media posts and whatnot, just imagine all of the ones that are kamikaze drones that have ordnance that doesn't necessarily explode, right? And all of that is lying around just waiting to harm somebody, even though that wasn't the original intent of those particular munitions was not for civilians or not to litter. It was to take out, either military or, like Markian was saying earlier, emergency personnel. But there are, hundreds of thousands of just the drone-dropped munitions. Do we have any other questions?
I have a point. I strongly encourage you, before leaving today, to go to the back and hold in your hand a piece of shrapnel. They're on the desk, they're metal, they're jagged, and they're heavy. And when you do that, you will then understand viscerally the danger that is posed by all of these unexploded munitions and artillery shells. To amplify what Alex said as well, and actually what Lesya said, we heard a phrase from someone, and we won't mention who it is, but why are we doing demining if there's still a warfare? Shouldn't we focus on drones and artillery? Well, it is true that there are many elements to being able to repel the Russian forces and the Russian invasion. But as Alex has explained, and as Markian has explained, in order for the armed forces to do their job, they need to continuously demine areas because they have to constantly move. If any of their bases or ammunition collections is left in a spot for much more than a short period of time, they will be targeted. So they constantly move. And at the same time, they're moving within a zone that is constantly bombed. What Lesya pointed out about the drones is the following. We think of mines as things that people place by hand. These days, there are many more unexploded grenades, unexploded artillery shells, unexploded mortar shells. Why? Because the drones that are carrying them will either run out of battery, so they will simply drop down to the ground, or through electronic warfare, the connection between the drone and the operator is lost, and the drone will land. It could land in bushes, tall grass, forested areas, in all kinds of areas where the typical machines that churn up the soil to explode them cannot operate. Someone will go and pick mushrooms. and that person will die. And you'll understand why when you hold that shrapnel in your hand. Plus, when you've seen all of the aerial shots of buildings that have been bombed out, and you think, well, when we reconstruct Ukraine, we'll just send in the bulldozers and they'll knock that down. They can't, because through area denial, each of those houses and buildings is now booby-trapped with tripwires and other booby traps to deny the other side the ability to use that as their sniper nest. So as a result of that, someone with their hands has to go into all of those buildings and demine them before they can even place the explosives to destroy them so that something new can be built. So do yourself a favor, before you leave today, go to the back and hold one of those pieces of metal in your hand. Then you will know why this is so crucial to the current defense and repelling of the Russian invasion. Sorry, Lesya, I took up too much time.
I love
As
what
I
you
usually do.
said. I love what you said, but that's definitely not a question. I'm just teasing. He's my spouse and my biggest fan. Yes, I can get away with it. So, does anybody have any questions? Because if you don't, we could ask our speakers for a final comment for those who would like to make it, or we can go to a question.
I have one question for Markian Kchik and Alexander Landry. So, as both of you were interested in the recent war in Ukraine, how do you think, what Canada have learned from this war and what Canada have not implemented yet that we learned from this war in terms of minesweeping?
Alex, would you like to maybe answer and I'll just add on to it, or because you're closer to home?
So could you repeat the question? Are you asking like what the soldiers have learned?
No. What Canada have learned from, like, what Canada have learned from this war in terms of minesweeping and overall like explosive dangers, because this is like the biggest war in 21st century. So what Canada have learned and not implemented yet, or already implemented that it learned from this war?
The easy answer is drones. It's the easy answer. Just before I came home last year from NATO, I went to the border of Poland and Ukraine and delivered a mobile training team on mine warfare and counter-explosive ordnance disposal. And when I showed up, I was the team lead. The first thing I told my soldiers, the instructors coming with me just before we met with the Ukrainians, was you make sure you spend 70% of your time listening, because they are actually the teachers here. We're giving doctrine and insight from the Western way of military in terms of planning processes and what we're good at. But in terms of tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs and SOPs, we have to be learning from them at this point. So we learned things about like the sensors, the fact that when you put out an electronic countermeasure, and I know I'm getting technical now, when you start doing electronic countermeasures and create a bubble to cut off command detonations for booby traps and whatnot, you've basically just created a bubble that can be sensed by drones to be hit by artillery strikes. So the question is, how do we protect ourselves electronically, as an example, without being sensed? Because EOD operators, we use doctrinally on our side right now, demining. It's a heavy presence, and it's done in an administrative posture as opposed to under pressure. So what am I taking away as a reservist moving forward, as a sapper and a combat engineer? How do I do my job without being allowed to be seen doing my job ever again? So that's something I'm going to be thinking about for a long time. And I think the Army has to have a good think about how they do decentralized operations moving forward.
Yeah, and I just basically fully agree with Alex there. And personally, we provided some training here in Ukraine, together with Ukrainians counterparts, and because some of us actually have an experience in Ukraine, and we had some members from the outside present. And at the end of the course, I asked them, how do you feel about the training? And the answer was, I understand that I'm behind, right? So we have to understand that at the certain point is we have to learn from Ukrainians. They are very rapid, very quick to respond with the countermeasures to the new threats. We don't necessarily have that, as quick, we're very slow to move, but we are slow. You know, Canada is slowly starting to move towards that.
Thank you very much. There's another question? I think we'll take a last question, given the time.
Thank you very much. Justin Dell, NATO Association. I perceive that most of your work is devoted to, it's essentially preventative. You want to prevent personnel from being killed or maimed by mines, but logically there must be those who unfortunately are not so lucky and are catastrophically injured. And I was wondering if you could shed any light, and this is for anyone on the panel who feels they are equipped to answer it, if you could shed some light on what sorts of resources are going towards assisting those who have been maimed or otherwise horribly injured, and to give them some quality of life after that. And it just seems to me like Canada in particular, I mean, we're a first world country with a lot of medical expertise, would be in a position to assist with that.
Thank you for the question. I was being given a microphone, but I regret to say that mine victim assistance is not among the areas. Sorry? Yeah, should be better now. Yeah. So I was about to say that unfortunately, mine victim assistance is not among the areas where Canada is the largest supporter. I'm sure Tymur would be able to tell you more about what is being done in Ukraine, and UDA is one of the organizations that provide victim assistance. I strongly believe that this is the way where we need to move. And overall, mine action projects, programs, initiatives need to be more comprehensive. They need to include and integrate coherently all the aspects and a lot of socioeconomic elements to support those who suffered, to support the communities that live in close proximity. And we saw the numbers on the screen. Around 6 million people live in close proximity to explosive threats in Ukraine. And over to you, Tymur, for more details on mine victim assistance.
Yes, first of all, thank you that you raise this very, very important question specifically for Ukrainians. Yes, we since 2023, we together with our international partners started like program which is like has component of mine victim assistance. Sorry, it's already night in my country, so that's why brain it's not work very properly. But only on this year we are started do this how it's noted in IMAS 1310. So before, mine victim assistance was quite limited by, for example, cash for protection or some separate one-time assistance, but we all understand the mine victim assistance has the main aim reintegration people to normal life. And to do this, it should be comprehensive and sustainable assistance. And only on this year, first project again started. It's small project which not can be covered by all needs of people, obviously, and not cover all people who are needs. But again, the good thing that it started. I know that in mine action strategy, which was adopted in last year, it was also big part of where identifying what we should do related to mine victim assistance. We have created and developed some special working group related mine victim assistance. But again, we should scale up our activities, our efforts to support people, because I heard that like at the beginning of this presentation, one of the speaker announced that like more than 1,000 people suffered from mine and exploded ordnance, but it's just official statistic. Only, for example, in our database, in UDA database, we already registered more than 3,200 people with mine explosive trauma. So we should care them. And thank you again that you raised this question.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, today for this very difficult conversation, because we know how many people are dying, and sappers as well in their line of work. But an important one, and one that speaks to the path to peace, and you know, what each of us can do individually, and then as societies and as countries to support this, support Ukrainians. Thank you so much, Tymur and Markian, for joining us from Ukraine. We know it's late there. We know you've had a long week, a long day. Thank you once again. Thank you, Ambassador, for coming out to Toronto and to bring your remarks and your experience to us. And thank you, dear panelists, Yulia and Alex as well. And I wanted to thank Mark Payne and John Carson and the others for the exhibits. And I do have a small little announcement, and that is that Alex Sprinsten is a Canadian journalist, producer, and documentary filmmaker, best known for his many years of work with the CBC. He is here with us. He is a great supporter of Ukraine and the Ukrainian community, and it's his birthday. Happy birthday, Alex. And we just have a final comment from the ambassador.
Thank you very much, Lesya, and thank you for this, as you rightly pointed out, very difficult but very needed discussion and conversation. And my final comment would consist of two parts. First, Russia poses real and even existential threat to whole transatlantic community. The best way to fight this threat is to enhance our support, to double our efforts in supporting Ukraine. And we are capable to do that. Russia, which poses this huge threat, in fact, is a very weak country. Russia's GDP is smaller than of Canada's, smaller of one American city, New York. They are weak to such extent, as you know, they begged for assistance, help from South Koreans, Iranians. And even if we combine GDP of China, Iran, Russia, it is 3 times less than our combined GDP. Our strength, $60 billion. EU, NATO, and like-minded Indo-Pacific countries. So we are capable to finally stop them and to beat this so-called unbeatable evil of 21st century. And my second comment, or maybe message, is to our sisters and brothers Ukrainians. Thank you very much for protecting us from that 21st century evil. And I would like to take this opportunity again and again to ensure you we are with you, we stand with you, and we will be with you, stand with you, no matter what.
And you know, let's also remember that, and let's be like Ukrainians. You know, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. So if each one of us does, we're coming closer to that support that will make the difference. So thank you so much, everybody, for today, and Slava Ukraini!
Thank you so much, Lesya. Thank you so much, speakers. If you could stay seated for a moment, we have some gifts for you on behalf of the NATO Association of Canada. And just for a little bit of a sum up, I want to thank everyone for coming today on this chilly Saturday to our conference exploring the future of Ukraine's NATO membership, viability of intermediary security guarantees, on-the-ground realities for businesses, and the critical role of demining efforts for recovery and reconstruction. I just wanted to highlight that in all of your programs that you have the brochures, the physical ones, as well as the virtual ones that you've scanned or that were emailed to you, you will find QR codes to a playlist on the NATO Association of Canada's YouTube, where the conference's proceedings will be uploaded on Monday. There is also a QR code for a page on our website where you will find a conference report also published on Monday, and also some resources including Canada-Ukraine Chamber of Commerce, tools for businesses who are curious, wondering on investing in Ukraine, and also an initiative by Mriya Aid to equip Ukrainian sappers with drone detectors and mine identification manuals. So there's an opportunity to donate to this cause. And I would really reiterate and encourage you before you leave, please go to the back of the conference space to look at the exhibits one more time, the demining and the VR, to really sum up the day's discussions from a bit of a different perspective. And with that, I would like to welcome Robert Baines for some concluding remarks. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Bogdana. I'll ask for you to stay on the stage as well. Friends, this has been an outstanding day. I really do want to thank all of you for being part of it. It really is, the reason it exists is, of course, because of our sponsors, but particularly this young woman here. Bogdana's done an amazing job, and we do give gifts to all of our speakers, but particularly to Bogdana. From all of us at the NATO Association, you've done a spectacular job. I think everybody in this room has had an email from you at least once a day for the past week. Well done, congratulations. You've really done a spectacular job. And this is what it's all about, people. This is exactly what the NATO Association is. It's a community of people like Bogdana and yourselves. And I really do hope that you'll join the NATO Association of Canada. Catherine is going to speak about that very briefly. But then also our other partner organizations as well. The Canada-Ukraine Chamber of Commerce, the Mriya Aid, of course, such a spectacular job. And of course, our friends, we couldn't have done it without our partners, the Embassy of Ukraine and the Consulate of Ukraine, along with the Monk School. I do have to mention the sponsors, the Tamardi Foundation, our gold sponsor, thank you again. And our silver sponsors, MedEng, the Peterson Literary Fund, Ukrainian Credit Union Limited, and our bronze sponsors, BCU Financial, Canada-Ukraine Foundation, the Canadian Association of Crimean Tatars, and Catherine E. Langley Hope, finally, our sustaining donor for so long, who's really helped to make the NATO Association what it is. Catherine?
So I said I hoped you'd speak to somebody you didn't know. I also hope you're going to speak to your member of parliament. And I also want you to know we receive no funding from the Canadian government. Of all the NATO countries, there are only 2 that do not receive any funding. The Atlantic Council and the NATO Association are meant to share with everyone the background, the ongoing history. We really need to know that this is a small world, and it's getting smaller, and we are at risk. We've lived a very protected life for a long time. We made great sacrifices in the First World War, but even more in the Second World War. Let's not do it again. Please join the NATO Association. Students, it's $25. Adults, it's $100. It's a tax-receivable donation. But we need your funding to assist us to do more of this so that we can share the information, because many people are being disinformed and misinformed. And it's not just Russia, but they're really good at it. But even the President of the United States is quoting misinformation. So he has his own agendas, but he's also hearing this. And lots of people are. So please, please, join us, support us, speak to your MPs, and let's keep Canada safe and democratic. Thank you.
Thank you much, Catherine. That ends our proceedings. If you'd please join us for some more refreshments and, of course, the activations in the back. And please keep the conversation going. As Catherine says, speak not only to your MPs, but your friends, those at work, your families. They are the ones who need to have this information and to keep pushing to make sure that Canada is strong as a part of the rules-based international order. Thank you so much.